Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to talk about some movies. A lot of popular ones, a lot of obscure ones that you may have never heard before, or even some older ones that either you want to revisit during this quarantine time, or something that you hadn't seen yet, but you heard of, never got around to watching. I'm going to give you some movies to watch during this quarantine period. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 out of each category. We're going to go comedy, dramatic, sci-fi, action. Let's get to it. First, with comedy.
First up is The Hitman's Bodyguard from 2017, and it stars Ryan Reynolds, Samuel L. Jackson, and Selma Hayek. In this comedy, the world's top bodyguard gets a new client, a hitman, who must testify at the International Criminal Court. They have to put their differences aside and work together to make it to the trial on time. Next, we're going to go back a ways, quite a ways. 1985. This is a guilty pleasure of mine. Better Off Dead, starring John Cusack, David Ogden-Stiers, and Kim Darby. A teenager has to deal with his girlfriend dumping him, among other family crises, homicidal paperboys, and a rival skier. And rounding out the list is 2018's Game Night, which stars Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams. Now in this movie, a group of friends who meet regularly for game nights find themselves entangled in a real-life mystery when the shady brother of one of them is seemingly kidnapped by dangerous gangsters.
Okay, let's go with dramas. For these, I want to go with the following.
We're going to go back to 1995. Casino. Now this is a tale of greed, deception, money, power, and murder. And it occurs between 2 best friends, a mafia enforcer and a casino executive. They compete against each other over the gambling empire and over a fast-living, fast-loving socialite. This was a Martin Scorsese movie, and it stars Robert De Niro, Sharon Stone, and Joe Pesci. This next one, I can't even believe it's this old. Came out in 2007. American Gangster, which stars Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. It's directed by Ridley Scott, and it's about an outcast New York City cop charged with bringing down Harlem drug lord Frank Lucas, who's played by Washington. And rounding out the list, from 2010, The Town, starring Ben Affleck, Rebecca Hall, John Hamm, and Jeremy Renner. This was directed also by Ben Affleck, and it's about a longtime thief planning his next job, and he tries to balance his feelings for a bank manager connected to an earlier heist and a hell-bent FBI agent looking to bring him and his crew down.
Okay, for my favorite genre, sci-fi and fantasy, I'm going to go a little different than what you might think. No, we're not going to go with Star Wars or anything like that. We're going to go with these 3 here.
We're going to start off with a guilty pleasure for a lot of people. This one's from 1986. It's Highlander. An immortal Scottish swordsman must confront the last of his immortal opponents, a murderously brutal barbarian who lusts for the fabled prize. This stars Christopher Lambert, Sean Connery, and Clancy Brown. Next up is Minority Report from 2002. This movie stars Tom Cruise, Colin Farrell, and Samantha Morton. It was directed by Steven Spielberg, and it takes place in the future, where a special police unit is able to arrest murderers before they commit their crimes. An officer from that unit is himself framed and accused of murder. And rounding out this list is 2009's Daybreakers. Now, because this deals with the vampire theme, a lot of people would consider it horror, but it wasn't as scary to me, it was more sci-fi. In the year 2019, a plague has transformed almost every human into vampires. And faced with a dwindling blood supply, the fractured dominant race plots their survival. Meanwhile, a researcher works with a covert band of vamps on a way to save humankind. This stars Ethan Hawke, Willem Dafoe, and Sam Neill.
Everybody likes a little action and adventure, so for the following 3 movies, this is what I've come up with.
For the action movies, we're going to start off with 2014's John Wick. If you haven't seen this yet, what's your problem? You got to check this movie out, and if you have seen it already, you probably don't mind watching it again. It stars Keanu Reeves, and it's about an ex-hitman who comes out of retirement to track down the gangsters that killed his dog and took everything from him. I know it sounds crazy, but if you haven't watched it, trust me, you'll love it. Second on this list is American Assassin. It came out in 2017, and after the death of his girlfriend at the hands of terrorists, a guy named Mitch Rapp is drawn into the world of counterterrorism and mentored by a tough-as-nails former U.S. Navy SEAL. This movie stars Dylan O'Brien, Michael Keaton, and Sanaa Lathan. And rounding out the list is 2012's Skyfall. Now, this is one of the better Bond movies, no matter which Bond you prefer, and even if you're not into James Bond, this is still a good movie and it stands well on its own. It stars Daniel Craig, Javier Bardem, and Naomi Harris. Bond's loyalty to M is tested when her past comes back to haunt her, when MI6 comes under attack, and 007 must track down and destroy the threat, no matter how personal the cost.
Who doesn't love a good scare? So for the horror movies, let's check out these 3 and tell me what you think.
This one is another guilty pleasure of mine. It's from 2002, it's called Dog Soldiers. And it was directed by Neil Marshall and stars Sean Pertwee, Kevin McKidd, and Emma Cleesby. A routine military exercise turns into a nightmare in the Scotland wilderness. And yes, even though it's called Dog Soldiers, it's about werewolves. And who doesn't like werewolves when you're talking about horror movies? Now talk about guilty pleasures. This one's from 1979, so it's one of the very first horror movies that I ever saw. It's called Zombie. Strangers searching for a young man's missing father arrive at a tropical island where the doctor desperately seeks the cause and cure of a recent epidemic of the undead. And although it's an older movie, it holds up pretty well. Just wait for the splinter and the eye scene, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And completing this list is 1982's The Thing, directed by John Carpenter. This has everything. A little bit of suspense, gore, all the horror. A research team in Antarctica is hunted by a shape-shifting alien that assumes the appearance of its victims. It stars Kurt Russell, Wilford Brimley, and Keith David.
All right, one more category, and
for our final set of movies, we're going to talk about mysteries. We're going to start with 2019's Knives Out. This is a Rian Johnson film, and it's about a detective that investigates the death of a patriarch of an eccentric family who's very combative as well. Not only is this a good mystery, but it had a lot of laughs as well. It stars Daniel Craig, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas, and a whole slew of other well-known actors. Now, this second mystery is unique in a couple of different ways. First off, it's called I See You. E-Y-E. I See You. It's from 2002, and originally it was called Detox. So, if you find it in a bargain bin at a Walmart or something, you may see it under that title, but it's also called I See You. And secondly, it's distinctive because it has Sylvester Stallone in the starring role, and he's usually mentioned among the action movies, not the mysteries. This movie's about a lead detective being stalked by a serial killer, and he's asked to check into a clinic treating law enforcement officials who can't face their jobs. Now, finishing up our list from 1995 is The Usual Suspects. Now, this is a mystery, but it can also be considered a thriller or a crime movie. Directed by Bryan Singer, it stars Kevin Spacey and Gabriel Byrne. It's the story of a sole survivor who tells the twisty events leading up to a horrific gun battle on a boat which began when 5 criminals met at a seemingly random police lineup. Comment below, let me know what movies you think belong on this list, and we can add those for future lists to come.
Hey, you're still here. That means I must be doing something right. If you haven't already, make sure that you like this video and be sure and subscribe. Also, hit that bell, that way you're notified every time I put out new content. As always, stay positive, stay blessed, and I'll see you again in the next one.